Now we are going to start medieval history, all chapters. Chapter 1, The Collapse That Started It All, Fall of Rome. This is the moment that accidentally kicked off the entire medieval era. In 476 CE, the Western Roman Empire collapsed quietly. Young Emperor Romulus Augustulus was removed from power by a general named Odoacer. No epic battle, no fanfare, just a slow, quiet end. With no Rome to protect them, Europe was suddenly fragmented. Roads fell into disrepair, trade slowed, and local lords began claiming lands for themselves. Entire kingdoms sprang up from the ruins: the Franks, the Visigoths, the Anglo-Saxons. This wasn't just an empire falling, it was the world pressing reset. The Middle Ages were born from that single, quiet moment in history. Chapter 2, The Kingdoms Born from Rome's Ashes. Once Rome fell, something strange happened: new kingdoms emerged, almost overnight. The Franks took over northern Gaul. The Visigoths settled in Spain. The Anglo-Saxons carved out England. Each kingdom created its own laws, armies, and traditions, no central authority, just local rulers. Life wasn't easy. Peasants worked the land, knights defended it, and kings constantly fought each other. But out of chaos came innovation, alliances, and the birth of medieval culture. Europe was no longer Roman, it was a patchwork of tiny powers, each trying to survive and grow. And this scramble for power defined the Middle Ages for centuries. Chapter 3, The Duke Who Declared War on His Own Brother. This is one of the dumbest mistakes in medieval history: a duke declared war on his own brother. In the 12th century, two brothers ruled neighboring duchies. A misread letter convinced the older brother that his sibling was plotting against him. He raised an army and marched to attack. The younger brother had no idea what was happening. When the armies met, both sides panicked. Fighting nearly happened, but they stopped when they realized they were family. Historians call it one of the most ridiculous wars in medieval history. A war that should never have happened, all because of a misread letter and paranoia. Chapter 4, The Viking Mistake That Changed Europe. The Vikings weren't always strategic, sometimes, their mistakes shaped history. In 793 CE, a small raid on Lindisfarne was supposed to be simple. But the Vikings underestimated the English defenses. They got trapped, some ships were lost, and word spread quickly. The attack sparked decades of fear, prompting local kingdoms to strengthen walls, armies, and alliances. What started as a blunder ended up reshaping Northern Europe's military strategy. Sometimes mistakes don't just fail, they change the course of history forever. Chapter 5, The Plague That Nearly Ended Europe. Europe nearly collapsed, not from war, but from a tiny flea. In the 14th century, the Black Death killed an estimated 25 to 50 million people. Entire towns were abandoned, trade slowed, and the feudal system began to crumble. The plague spread faster than anyone could react. Doctors were powerless, and panic ruled the land. Some nobles fled, leaving peasants to fend for themselves. But out of this disaster came change. Labor shortages increased the value of workers, cities grew, and Europe slowly emerged stronger and more organized. Chapter 6, Why Charlemagne Became Father of Europe. Charlemagne didn't just become emperor, he reshaped all of Europe. In 800 CE, Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne as Holy Roman Emperor. He united a massive portion of Western Europe, blending Frankish, Roman, and Christian traditions. He built schools, encouraged learning, and standardized laws. Even Latin, the language of Rome, got a medieval revival under his rule. Charlemagne's empire didn't last forever, but his influence shaped Europe for centuries. He earned the title, Father of Europe. Chapter 7, The Rise of the Vikings, Farmers Turned Raiders. Vikings weren't born raiders, they were farmers, with a bad sense of timing. Scandinavia's winters were harsh, farms were small, and wealth was scarce. So in the 8th century, they set sail in longships, raiding monasteries, villages, and towns. Lindisfarne, 793 CE, became their infamous first strike, shocking Europe. But the real twist? Many Viking raids started because of mistakes in navigation or misread currents. These mistakes turned Scandinavians into one of history's most feared warrior cultures. Chapter 8, The Castle Revolution, How Stone Walls Changed Everything. Castles weren't just buildings, they were power. In the 9th and 10th centuries, Europe shifted from wooden forts to massive stone castles. These new fortresses protected villages, controlled trade routes, and gave local lords real authority. Stone walls changed warfare forever. Sieges became common, armies needed new tactics, and knights finally had a place to defend. Castles didn't just protect people. They shaped medieval society, politics, and even daily life. Chapter 9, Knights, From Horsemen to Medieval Superstars. Knights were not born noble, they trained for years. By the 11th century they became the elite of Europe. Armed horsemen. Loyal to their lords. Bound by codes of honor, even if they didn't always follow them. They weren't just warriors, they were celebrities of the Middle Ages. Songs, stories, and legends turned them into iconic figures. Knights created a culture that still influences video games, movies, and stories today. Chapter 10, The Feudal System, The Medieval Web of Power. The Middle Ages had one rule: everyone owed someone. Kings gave land to nobles. Nobles protected knights. Knights protected peasants. Peasants worked the land to feed everyone. It wasn't perfect, but it kept Europe running for centuries. A giant, interconnected web of loyalty and survival. This system defined everyday life more than any battle or king ever could. Chapter 11, Medieval Asia, The Silk Road Superpower. While Europe struggled, Asia was booming. The Silk Road connected China, India, Persia, and beyond. Ideas, spices, inventions, and cultures traveled across continents. Gunpowder, paper, and advanced mathematics moved westward. Trade cities grew rich. Empires flourished. The medieval world wasn't just Europe, Asia was the beating heart of global exchange. Chapter 12, The Birth of Islam and its Golden Age. In the 7th century, Islam rose across the Arabian Peninsula. But something incredible followed, a scientific and cultural explosion. Scholars preserved ancient Greek knowledge. Medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and architecture thrived. Baghdad's House of Wisdom became the world's greatest library. While Europe faced instability, the Islamic world entered a golden age that shaped modern science. Chapter 13, The Crusades, When Two Worlds Collided. The 11th century brought a series of religiously driven wars called the Crusades. Knights, peasants, and kings marched toward the Middle East. The battles were intense, alliances unexpected, and the consequences huge. But beyond conflict, the Crusades opened Europe to new ideas. Spices, textiles, knowledge, and trade all flowed back. Europe changed forever because two worlds collided. Chapter 14, The Mongol Storm, the empire that shocked the world. In the 13th century, the Mongols rose under a powerful leader, Genghis Khan. They built the largest land empire in history. Their armies moved fast, organized in ways Europe had never seen. They connected trade routes, spread technologies, and linked East and West in a way no empire had before. The Mongols reshaped continents, and accidentally helped build the modern world. Chapter 15, The 100 Years' Struggle, England versus France. The name is long, the war was even longer. From 1337 to 1453, England and France battled for control, land, and crowns. It wasn't non-stop fighting, it was decades of tension, alliances, breakthroughs, and changing tactics. This long struggle produced legendary figures, like Joan of Arc, transformed medieval warfare, and set the stage for the rise of strong European nations. Chapter 16, How Islamic Scholars Saved Ancient Knowledge. While Europe was in the Dark Ages, scholars in the Islamic world preserved ancient Greek and Roman texts. They translated works on medicine, philosophy, and science into Arabic, improving on them in the process. Without their efforts, much of classical knowledge might have been lost forever, and Europe's Renaissance could have been delayed by centuries. Chapter 17, The Abbasids, the world's smartest empire. The Abbasid Caliphate, ruling from Baghdad, became a hub of culture and innovation. They created sophisticated irrigation systems, advanced mathematics, and revolutionary medicine. The empire showed that intelligence, organization, and culture could rival brute force in shaping history. Chapter 18, The Umayyads in Spain, Europe's most advanced city. Córdoba, under the Umayyads, became a city of wonders. It had libraries with hundreds of thousands of books, advanced architecture, and thriving trade. While much of Europe struggled, Córdoba was a beacon of science, learning, and culture, centuries ahead of its time. Chapter 19, The Silk Road, the medieval Internet. The Silk Road connected East and West, carrying silk, spices, and ideas. It wasn't just trade, it was a highway for culture, religion, and technology. Ideas traveled faster than armies, proving that commerce can shape civilizations as much as war. Chapter 20, How Paper Changed the World Forever. Paper, invented in China, eventually reached the Islamic world and Europe. It replaced costly parchment and made books, letters, and knowledge accessible. This seemingly simple invention helped spread learning, literacy, and ideas, and fueled the coming Renaissance. Chapter 21, The Feudal System, Power, Land, and Control. After Rome fell, Europe relied on a hierarchy of lords, vassals, and peasants. Land was power. Soldiers were paid in land. And loyalty mattered more than laws. It wasn't perfect, but feudalism gave structure to a chaotic Europe. Chapter 22, Knights, The Truth Behind the Armor. Knights weren't just flashy warriors. They were professional soldiers, trained from childhood, bound by oaths of loyalty. Their armor, though heavy, allowed them to dominate battlefields, but many died from poor strategy, not swords. Chapter 23, The Real Life of a Medieval Peasant. Most people weren't kings or knights, they were peasants. They worked fields, paid taxes, and lived short, harsh lives. Yet their labor fed kingdoms, built castles, and supported empires. History often forgets them, but they were the backbone of medieval society. Chapter 24, The Birth of Medieval Universities. Medieval universities began as religious schools but became centers of learning. Oxford, Paris, and Bologna taught law, medicine, and philosophy. These schools preserved knowledge, trained leaders, and laid the foundation for modern education. Chapter 25, Monks, Manuscripts and the Dawn of Libraries. Monks copied manuscripts by hand, preserving knowledge through centuries of war and plague. Without their dedication, many classical texts would have vanished. Medieval monasteries became secret libraries that kept Europe's memory alive. Chapter 26, Why Medieval Europe Was Obsessed with Relics. Medieval Europe had a strange fascination, relics. Pieces of saints, bones, or objects from holy sites were worshipped, traded, and even fought over. Churches displayed them to attract pilgrims, wealth, and influence, proving that sometimes faith and power were inseparable. Chapter 27, The Rise of the Normans. The Normans started as Viking settlers in France. Over time, they became skilled warriors and rulers, eventually conquering England in 1066. Their rise shows how adaptability and ruthlessness could turn outsiders into rulers of entire nations. Chapter 28, The Battle of Hastings, 1066's Big Shock. In 1066, William the Conqueror defeated King Harold of England at Hastings. It wasn't just a battle, it was a complete reshaping of English culture, language, and governance. A single battlefield changed the course of an entire nation. Chapter 29, The Doomsday Book, the first mega database. After conquering England, William the Conqueror wanted complete control. He commissioned the Doomsday Book, a detailed survey of land, people, and resources. It was the medieval equivalent of a mega database, showing that record-keeping could be as powerful as armies. Chapter 30, Eleanor of Aquitaine, the most powerful woman in Europe. Eleanor of Aquitaine wasn't just a queen, she influenced politics across France and England. She married 2 kings, guided armies, and supported culture and education. Her life shows that power in the Middle Ages wasn't only male, and influence could last generations. Chapter 31, The Crusades, Why They Really Started. The Crusades weren't just religious wars. European kings wanted power, wealth, and land. The Pope wanted influence. And local lords wanted glory. What began as holy missions turned into decades of conquest, trade, and political manipulation. Chapter 32, The Hidden World of Medieval Assassins. The Assassins, a secretive Islamic sect, were feared across the Middle East. Using stealth, poison, and intimidation, they influenced politics far beyond their small numbers. Even kings and generals feared a dagger from the shadows. Chapter 33, The Gold That Ruined an Empire. In Mali, West Africa, King Mansa Musa's wealth was legendary. His pilgrimage to Mecca flooded markets with gold, causing inflation across regions he passed. Even riches, if mismanaged, can shake entire economies. Chapter 34, A War Started by an Apple Orchard. Sometimes wars began over trivial things. In the 13th century, 2 French lords went to battle because of a dispute over trees and orchards. It seems absurd, but land, resources, and pride were everything in medieval society. Chapter 35, The Map That Lied to the World. Medieval maps were as much imagination as geography. They placed monsters, unknown lands, and mythical rivers alongside real cities. Explorers often set off to find places that didn't exist, proving that sometimes misinformation drives history. Chapter 36, The Knight Who Refused to Die. Some knights became legends not for skill, but for sheer stubbornness. During battles, one knight was struck multiple times, left for dead, yet somehow returned to fight again. Stories like this fueled medieval myths and proved that courage, or sheer luck, could make someone unforgettable. Chapter 37, The Crown That Was Stolen 3 Times. Medieval crowns weren't just symbols, they were prizes for thieves and rivals. One European king's crown was stolen not once, but 3 times by enemies, rebels, and even dishonest courtiers. It shows that power was always fragile, even for monarchs. Chapter 38, A War Fought Over a Falcon. In the Middle Ages, even a bird could start a war. 2 nobles argued over a prized falcon, and what began as a personal dispute escalated into a full-scale battle with hundreds of casualties. Sometimes, trivial pride caused massive consequences. Chapter 39, The Scribe Who Saved a Language. In a monastery, a single scribe copied ancient texts by hand, preserving a dying language. Without him, centuries of poetry, law, and history would have been lost. Medieval scribes were the unsung heroes keeping knowledge alive. Chapter 40, The Child Who Inherited an Empire. Sometimes heirs were way too young to rule. A 5-year-old prince once inherited an entire kingdom. His regents made decisions in his name, some wise, some disastrous. It shows how fragile medieval power could be, and how mistakes were often unavoidable. Chapter 41, The Island That Controlled All Trade. Some small islands became economic superpowers. Strategically located, they controlled shipping lanes, taxed merchants, and became rich beyond imagination. Geography often mattered more than armies. Chapter 42, The Battle Won Without a Single Arrow. In one medieval battle, a clever commander avoided fighting completely. He tricked the enemy into retreating by spreading false rumors and positioning decoys. Sometimes, brains mattered more than swords. Chapter 43, The Inventor Who Changed the Battlefield. Medieval inventors sometimes made weapons that revolutionized war. A new type of cannon or siege engine could break walls and end centuries-old stalemates in a single day. Innovation was just as deadly as brute force. Chapter 44, A Wedding That Ended a 100-Year War. Peace sometimes came from marriage rather than battle. Chapter 46, The Scholar Who Outsmarted an Empire. Some medieval scholars weren't just smart, they were dangerous. One mathematician created codes and calculations so advanced that even rulers struggled to understand them. Knowledge, not armies, sometimes gave people power that could challenge empires. Chapter 47, The Prison No One Returned From. Some medieval prisons were designed to be inescapable. One castle held criminals in cells so deep and isolated that escape was considered impossible. It became a symbol of fear, reminding everyone that power often relied on intimidation as much as law. Chapter 48, The Queen Who Ruled from the Shadows. Not all rulers wore crowns openly. A medieval queen secretly guided decisions, negotiated treaties, and controlled armies without anyone realizing her influence. Her story proves that sometimes the most powerful people in history operate unseen. Chapter 49, A Kingdom Destroyed by a Storm. Weather could be deadlier than armies. One medieval kingdom suffered a catastrophic storm that flooded farmland, sank ships, and wiped out entire towns. Natural disasters shaped history as much as battles ever could. Chapter 50, The Day Books Became More Powerful Than Swords. Knowledge was often more deadly than weapons. Monks and scribes preserved texts, maps, and strategies. A well-placed book could inspire rebellion, teach new techniques, or preserve secrets. Sometimes, ideas outlast armies. Chapter 51, The Siege That Lasted a Lifetime. Some sieges dragged on for years. Castles were fortified, supplies ran low, and both sides suffered. But defenders sometimes held out long enough to force negotiations. Patience, endurance, and strategy could win where brute force failed. Chapter 52, The Heir Who Never Wanted the Throne. Not every royal heir was eager to rule. One medieval prince refused coronation, preferring scholarly life. His absence created political chaos, rebellions, and power struggles. Sometimes, personal choice could shape the fate of nations. Chapter 53, The Merchant Who Challenged Monarchs. Medieval merchants sometimes became so wealthy that kings feared them. One merchant financed armies, influenced elections, and even dictated trade policies. Money could rival bloodlines in power. Chapter 54, The Monk Who Invented a New World. Monks weren't just copying books, some created innovations that changed society. One monk experimented with agriculture, metallurgy, and irrigation, revolutionizing farming and local economies. Innovation often came from unexpected places. Chapter 55, A War That Started Over a Falcon. Pride and obsession sometimes caused disasters. Two nobles fought a full battle because of a prized falcon. Hundreds were killed, villages destroyed, all over a bird. History often turns on the smallest things. Chapter 56, The Mysterious Disappearance of a King. One medieval king vanished without a trace. No battles, no executions, just gone. Entire courts searched for him, sparking rumors of assassination, kidnapping, or divine wrath. His disappearance changed the line of succession and threw the kingdom into chaos. Chapter 57, The Soldier Who Became a Saint. Some soldiers survived impossible odds and became legends. One knight, after years of battles, retired to a monastery and was later canonized. Medieval Europe blurred the line between warriors and saints. Chapter 58, The Fortress Built to Terrify Invaders. Some castles were designed purely for intimidation. High walls, sharp spikes, and visible torture chambers scared enemies before a single sword was drawn. Psychological warfare was as important as physical defense. Chapter 59, A Kingdom Saved by a Teenager. A young heir once rallied troops and civilians, preventing an invasion. At barely 16, she led with intelligence, courage, and daring strategy. Age didn't matter, leadership did. Chapter 60, The Painter Who Defined an Era. Medieval art wasn't just decoration. One painter introduced new techniques and perspectives that influenced architecture, manuscripts, and culture for generations. Even in war-torn times, creativity thrived. Chapter 61, The Bridge Battle of a Single Afternoon. A crucial bridge once decided a war in just a few hours. Two armies clashed, one side retreated, and an entire campaign was over before sunset. Sometimes, history turns on a single strategic point. Chapter 62, The Queen Who Rewrote the Law. Some queens used their influence to change society. One passed reforms that improved rights for peasants and merchants, reshaping governance while wielding soft power. Medieval law wasn't fixed, it could be rewritten by vision and courage. Chapter 63, The Town That Survived the Plague. While cities around Europe fell to the Black Death, one town survived. Strict quarantine, clever resource management, and cooperation saved lives. It proved that preparation and unity could overcome even catastrophic disasters. Chapter 64, A King Crowned by Accident. A medieval ceremony went wrong, a young noble was crowned instead of the intended king. Despite the error, he kept the crown, ruled effectively, and became legendary. Sometimes, history rewards accidents. Chapter 65, The Island Where Knights Became Legends. Certain remote islands trained knights under harsh conditions. Those who survived were feared across Europe for their strength, strategy, and endurance. Isolation forged legends. Chapter 66, The Empress Who Refused to Step Down. An empress defied tradition, refusing abdication and asserting her rule. She negotiated treaties, led armies, and kept her empire intact despite constant opposition. Power sometimes depends on sheer will. Chapter 67, The Trade Route That Made Cities Rich Overnight. Control of a single trade route could make or break kingdoms. Chapter 60, The Painter Who Defined an Era. Medieval art wasn't just decoration. One painter introduced new techniques and perspectives that influenced architecture, manuscripts, and culture for generations. Even in war-torn times, creativity thrived. Chapter 61, The Bridge Battle of a Single Afternoon. A crucial bridge once decided a war in just a few hours. Two armies clashed, one side retreated, and an entire campaign was over before sunset. Sometimes, history turns on a single strategic point. Chapter 62, The Queen Who Rewrote the Law. Some queens used their influence to change society. One passed reforms that improved rights for peasants and merchants, reshaping governance while wielding soft power. Medieval law wasn't fixed, it could be rewritten by vision and courage. Chapter 63, The Town That Survived the Plague. While cities around Europe fell to the Black Death, one town survived. Strict quarantine, clever resource management, and cooperation saved lives. It proved that preparation and unity could overcome even catastrophic disasters. Chapter 64, A King Crowned by Accident. A medieval ceremony went wrong, a young noble was crowned instead of the intended king. Despite the error, he kept the crown, ruled effectively, and became legendary. Sometimes, history rewards accidents. Chapter 65, The Island Where Knights Became Legends. Certain remote islands trained knights under harsh conditions. Those who survived were feared across Europe for their strength, strategy, and endurance. Isolation forged legends. Chapter 66, The Empress Who Refused to Step Down. An empress defied tradition, refusing abdication and asserting her rule. She negotiated treaties, led armies, and kept her empire intact despite constant opposition. Power sometimes depends on sheer will. Chapter 67, The Trade Route That Made Cities Rich Overnight. Control of a single trade route could make or break kingdoms. One city gained immense wealth overnight when a major road redirected through it. Economics could be more decisive than armies in medieval power struggles. Chapter 68, The Prince Who Was Never Seen Again. A young prince disappeared mysteriously, possibly kidnapped or killed. His vanishing caused succession crises, rebellions, and a reshuffling of alliances. Sometimes, the absence of one person changes history. Chapter 69, The Battle Fought for 7 Minutes. A medieval conflict once lasted only 7 minutes. One side panicked, the other exploited the chaos, and the entire battlefield was won or lost before most soldiers even realized it. Speed, fear, and timing can decide wars. Chapter 70, The Order of Warriors with No Fear of Death. Some medieval orders of warriors thrived on complete fearlessness. They became legends not for strategy, but for bravery and unwavering loyalty, intimidating entire regions. Medieval Europe respected courage as much as cunning. Chapter 71, The Blacksmith Who Defended a Kingdom. A humble blacksmith once saved an entire town from invading forces. He crafted weapons, trained civilians, and led ambushes that turned the tide. Sometimes, heroes come from the least expected places. Chapter 72, The Bishop Who Led an Army. Not all medieval leaders were kings or generals. One bishop took up arms to defend his city, directing strategy from the cathedral steps. Faith and leadership could literally wield swords. Chapter 73, The Plague Doctor Who Made It Worse. In trying to stop disease, some medieval doctors made mistakes. One expert unknowingly spread infection because of unclean instruments and superstition. Medicine in the Middle Ages was a mix of bravery and trial and error. Chapter 74, The Merchant Ship That Changed Trade Forever. A single merchant ship discovered a faster route to spices and silk. That route shifted wealth, influence, and power across continents. Sometimes, commerce drove history more than kings or battles. Chapter 75, The Fortress That Couldn't Be Taken. Some castles were so perfectly designed that sieges failed repeatedly. Invaders starved, morale collapsed, and defenders became legends. Medieval architecture could win wars without lifting a sword. Chapter 76, The Knight Who Betrayed His Own Side. A knight once switched allegiances mid-battle. His betrayal caused chaos, panic, and a stunning defeat for his original army. Loyalty was valuable, and betrayal could change history in an instant. Chapter 77, The Festival That Turned into a Riot. A medieval celebration spiraled out of control, leading to a violent clash. Hundreds were injured, nobles humiliated, and traditions were rewritten. Even joy could spark disaster in medieval towns. Chapter 78, The Peasant Who Led a Revolt. A single courageous peasant organized a revolt against a tyrannical lord. Though poorly armed, his leadership inspired hundreds to fight for freedom. Peasants weren't powerless, they could shape history when they acted together. Chapter 79, The Mistaken Treaty That Started a War. A poorly translated document once triggered a full-scale conflict. Nations thought they had peace, but a single misworded sentence caused armies to march and cities to burn. Sometimes, diplomacy fails because of simple human error. Chapter 80, The Legend That Was Too Strange to Be True. Some medieval stories are so bizarre that historians still debate them. From green children appearing from caves to kings vanishing without a trace, Europe was full of unexplained events. History wasn't just facts, it was a mix of myth, mistakes, and human drama. Chapter 81, The Town That Paid Ransoms to Its Own King. A medieval town once raised money to pay tribute to their own king. The king demanded taxes to fund a campaign elsewhere, and the townspeople literally collected gold to protect themselves from their ruler. Sometimes, commerce drove history more than kings or battles. Chapter 75, The Fortress That Couldn't Be Taken. Some castles were so perfectly designed that sieges failed repeatedly. Invaders starved, morale collapsed, and defenders became legends. Medieval architecture could win wars without lifting a sword. Chapter 76, The Knight Who Betrayed His Own Side. A knight once switched allegiances mid-battle. His betrayal caused chaos, panic, and a stunning defeat for his original army. Loyalty was valuable, and betrayal could change history in an instant. Chapter 77, The Festival That Turned into a Riot. A medieval celebration spiraled out of control, leading to a violent clash. Hundreds were injured, nobles humiliated, and traditions were rewritten. Even joy could spark disaster in medieval towns. Chapter 78, The Peasant Who Led a Revolt. A single courageous peasant organized a revolt against a tyrannical lord. Though poorly armed, his leadership inspired hundreds to fight for freedom. Peasants weren't powerless, they could shape history when they acted together. Chapter 79, The Mistaken Treaty That Started a War. A poorly translated document once triggered a full-scale conflict. Nations thought they had peace, but a single misworded sentence caused armies to march and cities to burn. Sometimes, diplomacy fails because of simple human error. Chapter 80, The Legend That Was Too Strange to Be True. Some medieval stories are so bizarre that historians still debate them. From green children appearing from caves to kings vanishing without a trace, Europe was full of unexplained events. History wasn't just facts, it was a mix of myth, mistakes, and human drama. Chapter 81, The Town That Paid Ransoms to Its Own King. A medieval town once raised money to pay tribute to their own king. The king demanded taxes to fund a campaign elsewhere, and the townspeople literally collected gold to protect themselves from their ruler. Sometimes survival meant paying off the people in power, even your own monarch. Chapter 82, The Knight Who Dueled a Ghost. One medieval knight swore he fought a spectral opponent during a night patrol. Villagers claimed the ghost belonged to a rival family, still seeking revenge. Whether myth or madness, the story spread fear and legend for decades. Chapter 83, The King Who Lost His Crown in a River. During a river crossing, a medieval king's crown slipped into the water. The loss humiliated him, sparked rumors of divine punishment, and even inspired uprisings. Sometimes, history is shaped by pure accident. Chapter 84, The Siege That Ended with a Feast. A siege once ended not with a battle, but with a banquet. The attacking army ran out of food and the defenders invited them to a feast to negotiate peace. Diplomacy and hunger sometimes win where swords fail. Chapter 85, The Alchemist Who Nearly Burned a Kingdom. An ambitious medieval alchemist experimented with dangerous chemicals. One mishap caused a massive fire that destroyed part of a city. Curiosity and science sometimes collided with disaster. Chapter 86, The General Who Misread the Map. A commander once sent his troops in the wrong direction due to a misread map. They ended up in enemy territory, losing key positions and morale. Even great leaders could fall victim to simple mistakes. Chapter 87, The Bishop Who Spied on Kings. Some bishops weren't just spiritual leaders, they were political masterminds. One collected secrets from kings and nobles, influencing wars and treaties behind the scenes. Medieval power was as much about intelligence as armies. Chapter 88, The Festival That Sparked a War. A celebration in one town escalated into a full-blown conflict. Insults, pranks, and overexcited nobles turned fun into chaos, with lasting consequences for the region. Even entertainment could have deadly stakes in medieval times. Chapter 89, The Merchant Who Bought a Kingdom. A wealthy merchant once purchased control over an entire small kingdom. Money, clever negotiations, and timing allowed him to become a ruler without ever wielding a sword. Wealth was often more powerful than bloodlines. Chapter 90, The King Who Pretended to be Dead. A medieval king faked his death to avoid assassination. This ruse allowed him to escape political enemies, regroup his forces, and reclaim his throne. Sometimes survival depended on deception more than strength. Chapter 91, The Queen Who Outlawed Colors. A medieval queen banned every bright color in her kingdom. She believed vivid clothing encouraged vanity and disorder among nobles. For years, her court lived in dull shades, and foreign visitors described the palace as a world drained of color. Chapter 92, The Soldier Who Slept Through a Battle. During a night raid, one soldier fell asleep behind a cart of grain. The attack passed without him noticing, and by sunrise the enemy had already retreated. His strange luck made him a quiet legend among his camaraderie. Chapter 93, The Castle That Slowly Sank. A once mighty fortress was built on unstable marshland. Over decades, its towers tilted and its floors cracked as the ground swallowed it inch by inch. By the next century, only its tallest tower remained visible above the soil. Chapter 94, The Spy Who Used Music as Messages. A traveling musician carried coded instructions in his songs. Rhythms and notes replaced entire sentences, allowing him to pass information undetected. His melodies guided armies without anyone suspecting the truth. Chapter 95, The King Who Feared Mirrors. This medieval king believed reflections could steal a person's spirit. He ordered every mirror and polished surface removed from his palace. Visitors were warned never to bring anything reflective near him. Chapter 96, The Storm That Ended a War. Two armies prepared for a decisive battle when a violent storm struck. Floods washed away bridges, horses, and supplies, forcing both sides to retreat. Leaders declared the disaster a sign from above and reluctantly agreed to peace. Chapter 97, The Monk Who Tried to Count the World. Obsessed with measurement, a monk attempted to calculate Earth's size using grains of sand. He worked in silence for years, filling pages with estimates and diagrams. Though eccentric, his final numbers were surprisingly close to reality. Chapter 98, The Kingdom That Banned Spoons. A strange superstition convinced the king that spoons brought illness. For nearly a decade, citizens ate with knives, bread, or their hands instead. When the ban finally ended, people celebrated by crafting spoons from silver and wood. Chapter 99, The Scholar Who Dug Through Books. A prisoner requested books for study, earning the guards' trust. Unknown to them, he used the heavy volumes to carve at the stone wall each night. After years of quiet work, he slipped through a narrow hole and disappeared forever. Chapter 100, The Army That Marched Backwards. To mislead enemy scouts, a general ordered his troops to walk in reverse. Tracks in the dirt made it appear they were retreating, not advancing. The deception caused the enemy to abandon their stronghold without a fight. Chapter 101, The King Who Built a Bridge to Nowhere. A king ordered a massive stone bridge constructed across a river. But political tensions shifted, and the road it connected to was never finished. For generations, the bridge stood isolated, a monument to wasted ambition. Chapter 102, The Merchant Who Outsmarted a Pirate Fleet. A lone merchant ship tricked a group of pirates by flying the flags of rival kingdoms. The pirates hesitated, fearing retaliation from powerful enemies. The merchant sailed away untouched, earning a reputation for clever deception. Chapter 103, The Village That Rang Bells All Night. One village believed evil spirits roamed after sunset. To protect themselves, they rang church bells until sunrise. Travelers reported sleepless nights, but the villagers swore the ritual kept them safe. Chapter 104, The Knight Who Refused a Sword. A knight chose to fight using a wooden staff instead of a blade. He believed it represented discipline and restraint. Despite mockery, he won several duels and became known for his unusual honor. Chapter 105, The Baker Who Supplied Two Armies. During a regional conflict, a baker secretly sold bread to both sides. Each army believed he supported them alone. When the war ended, the baker's shop became famous as neutral ground. Chapter 106, The Festival That Lasted an Entire Month. A harvest celebration grew so popular that its 3-day schedule expanded into a month. Markets, music, and feasting filled the streets non-stop. For many, it was the happiest and least productive month of the year. Chapter 107, The Scholar Who Predicted an Eclipse by Accident. A medieval scholar made a simple arithmetic error. By chance, the mistake aligned perfectly with an upcoming solar eclipse. When his prediction came true, people believed he possessed divine insight. Chapter 108, The Peasant Who Became Court Advisor. A farmer impressed the king with practical solutions during a dispute. The king appointed him as an informal advisor, shocking nobles. His simple logic often resolved issues that baffled the court. Chapter 109, The Noble Who Dueled His Own Reflection. A proud nobleman mistook his reflection in a polished shield for an intruder. He challenged it to a duel, causing confusion among onlookers. The embarrassing incident became a quiet palace joke. Chapter 110, The Fortress with No Doors. Built for extreme defense, a fortress was constructed with a single hidden entrance. Only a few engineers knew its location. After they died, the door's position became a mystery for decades. Chapter 111, The King Who Taxed Shadows. A financial crisis pushed a desperate king to invent unusual taxes. He charged fees based on the size of a person's shadow at noon. The law was mocked, ignored, and eventually repealed. Chapter 112, The Woman Who Outran a Messenger. A young villager challenged the royal messenger to a race. Her speed shocked the court, and she was hired to deliver urgent letters. She became one of the kingdom's most reliable couriers. Chapter 105, The Baker Who Supplied Two Armies. During a regional conflict, a baker secretly sold bread to both sides. Each army believed he supported them alone. When the war ended, the baker's shop became famous as neutral ground. Chapter 106, The Festival That Lasted an Entire Month. A harvest celebration grew so popular that its 3-day schedule expanded into a month. Markets, music, and feasting filled the streets non-stop. For many, it was the happiest and least productive month of the year. Chapter 107, The Scholar Who Predicted an Eclipse by Accident. A medieval scholar made a simple arithmetic error. By chance, the mistake aligned perfectly with an upcoming solar eclipse. When his prediction came true, people believed he possessed divine insight. Chapter 108, The Peasant Who Became Court Advisor. A farmer impressed the king with practical solutions during a dispute. The king appointed him as an informal advisor, shocking nobles. His simple logic often resolved issues that baffled the court. Chapter 109, The Noble Who Dueled His Own Reflection. A proud nobleman mistook his reflection in a polished shield for an intruder. He challenged it to a duel, causing confusion among onlookers. The embarrassing incident became a quiet palace joke. Chapter 110, The Fortress with No Doors. Built for extreme defense, a fortress was constructed with a single hidden entrance. Only a few engineers knew its location. After they died, the door's position became a mystery for decades. Chapter 111, The King Who Taxed Shadows. A financial crisis pushed a desperate king to invent unusual taxes. He charged fees based on the size of a person's shadow at noon. The law was mocked, ignored, and eventually repealed. Chapter 112, The Woman Who Outran a Messenger. A young villager challenged the royal messenger to a race. Her speed shocked the court, and she was hired to deliver urgent letters. She became one of the kingdom's most reliable couriers. Chapter 113, The Artist Who Painted with Ash. An artist used ash from burnt wood to create lifelike portraits. His unusual medium produced haunting, smoky images. Nobles prized his work, though many found it unsettling. Chapter 114, The Town That Buried Its Streets. After a series of muddy floods, a town chose to raise the ground level instead of rebuilding. Over years, entire streets were buried beneath new layers of stone. The old town still lies hidden below. Chapter 115, The Lord Who Spoke Only at Night. A nobleman refused to speak during daylight hours. He claimed the quiet of night brought clearer thoughts. His midnight meetings became a strange but respected tradition. Chapter 116, The Blacksmith Who Forged Unbreakable Chains. A blacksmith perfected a secret technique that produced unusually strong chain links. Kings, merchants, and even rival kingdoms sought his work. He guarded the method fiercely until his final days. Chapter 117, The Page Who Accidentally Saved a Kingdom. A young page tripped while delivering a message, spilling documents everywhere. The commotion delayed the king just long enough to avoid an ambush. The accident became a celebrated stroke of luck. Chapter 118, The Island That Changed Owners 14 Times. A small island rich in timber and fish was constantly contested. Over centuries, it switched rulers again and again through treaties, trades, and small battles. Its people adapted to constant change better than any army. Chapter 119, The Scribe Who Wrote in Invisible Ink. A monastery scribe experimented with special plant extracts. When dry, his writings looked blank, but heat revealed the text. Only trusted monks knew how to read his hidden messages. Chapter 120, The Carpenter Who Built a Clock Tower Alone. A skilled carpenter spent years designing and constructing a massive wooden clock tower. Working mostly by himself, he completed a structure admired across the region. It became a symbol of dedication and patience. Chapter 121, The King Who Never Sat. A ruler refused to sit on his throne, claiming kings must always be vigilant. Visitors found him walking tirelessly, inspecting guards, markets, and palaces. His restlessness kept the kingdom unusually organized and alert. Chapter 122, The Scribe Who Counted Shadows. Obsessed with detail, a scribe recorded the length and angle of shadows each day. His notebooks became a complex calendar and early astronomical guide. Even centuries later, scholars studied his meticulous charts for hidden patterns. Chapter 123, The Village That Painted Windows. Instead of curtains, villagers painted colored glass for privacy. Sunlight streaming through created a constantly shifting kaleidoscope inside homes. Travelers often mistook the village for a dreamlike palace. Chapter 124, The Knight Who Never Drew His Sword. One warrior survived decades of battle without unsheathing his blade. He relied on strategy, diplomacy, and the fearsome reputation of his armor. Legend spoke of victories achieved without violence. Chapter 125, The Monastery That Sang in Rain. Monks discovered that chanting during storms amplified sound across the valley. Travelers claimed the melodies soothed both soul and weather. The monastery became famous for its harmonious storms. Chapter 126, The Ship That Returned Alone. A merchant ship vanished at sea, only to wash ashore years later, empty. Its cargo remained intact, and no crew was ever found. Mariners whispered that the ship had sailed a hidden route beyond time. Chapter 127, The Castle That Whispered. Visitors claimed the halls murmured secrets at night. It was later discovered that wind, stone, and ancient construction created natural echoes. Still, many insisted the whispers contained hidden messages from the past. Chapter 128, The Farmer Who Taught Wolves. A hermit taught wolves to hunt alongside him without fear of humans. Neighbors were wary until they saw him living safely among predators. His unusual partnership became a story passed down for generations. Chapter 129, The Bell That Tolled by Itself. A church bell rang at dawn, noon, and night, even with no one to pull the rope. Villagers called it a sign of protection, though no explanation ever emerged. The sound became a comforting constant in a turbulent world. Chapter 130, The Town That Grew Its Own Food Underground. A settlement facing harsh winters built subterranean gardens. Root vegetables, mushrooms, and herbs flourished beneath the soil. Generations thrived in secrecy, creating a self-sufficient hidden city. Chapter 131, The Knight Who Fought with Words. A knight challenged rivals with debates instead of swords. He won tournaments by logic and persuasion, leaving armies baffled and unscathed. His victories proved that wit could sometimes triumph over steel. Chapter 132, The Forest That Moved. Villagers noticed trees slowly shifting position over decades. Paths changed, clearings disappeared, and hunters got lost in familiar woods. No one knew why, but the forest became a symbol of nature's quiet power. Chapter 133, The King Who Hid His Face. A monarch refused to show his face in public, covering it with veils and masks. Citizens whispered about mysterious features and divine signs. He ruled effectively, proving that power didn't need a familiar face. Chapter 134, The Bridge That Carried Music. Engineers built a wooden bridge that amplified every step as a note. Travelers crossing felt like they were walking through a giant instrument. Merchants and minstrels flocked to hear the living music of the bridge. Chapter 128, The Farmer Who Taught Wolves. A hermit taught wolves to hunt alongside him without fear of humans. Neighbors were wary until they saw him living safely among predators. His unusual partnership became a story passed down for generations. Chapter 129, The Bell That Tolled by Itself. A church bell rang at dawn, noon, and night, even with no one to pull the rope. Villagers called it a sign of protection, though no explanation ever emerged. The sound became a comforting constant in a turbulent world. Chapter 130, The Town That Grew Its Own Food Underground. A settlement facing harsh winters built subterranean gardens. Root vegetables, mushrooms, and herbs flourished beneath the soil. Generations thrived in secrecy, creating a self-sufficient hidden city. Chapter 131, The Knight Who Fought with Words. A knight challenged rivals with debates instead of swords. He won tournaments by logic and persuasion, leaving armies baffled and unscathed. His victories proved that wit could sometimes triumph over steel. Chapter 132, The Forest That Moved. Villagers noticed trees slowly shifting position over decades. Paths changed, clearings disappeared, and hunters got lost in familiar woods. No one knew why, but the forest became a symbol of nature's quiet power. Chapter 133, The King Who Hid His Face. A monarch refused to show his face in public, covering it with veils and masks. Citizens whispered about mysterious features and divine signs. He ruled effectively, proving that power didn't need a familiar face. Chapter 134, The Bridge That Carried Music. Engineers built a wooden bridge that amplified every step as a note. Travelers crossing felt like they were walking through a giant instrument. Merchants and minstrels flocked to hear the living music of the bridge. Chapter 135, The Village That Lived with Wolves. A remote town coexisted with a wolf pack, sharing hunting grounds and territory. Children grew up playing near the wild animals without harm. Outsiders called it madness, but the villagers considered it harmony. Chapter 136, The Monk Who Spoke to Stones. A monk claimed stones carried memories of the world. He meditated among rocks and carved symbols into walls. Later, historians discovered the carvings preserved unusual details of forgotten events. Chapter 137, The Castle That Changed Color. Moss and lichens coated an abandoned fortress, making it appear different each season. Travelers mistook it for a magical palace, sometimes visiting multiple times to see its new hue. The castle became a living painting shaped by nature. Chapter 138, The Ship That Carried Trees. A merchant transported saplings across the sea to plant new forests. Despite storms and pirates, many trees survived and grew into thriving groves. His voyages transformed coastlines and inspired others to plant abroad. Chapter 139, The Town That Sang at Dawn. Every morning, villagers sang together in the square. Even travelers passing through felt compelled to join the chorus. The ritual became a symbol of unity and resilience through generations. Chapter 140, The Blacksmith Who Forged Shadows. A smith crafted armor that seemed to absorb light, appearing almost invisible. Enemies feared him more than any blade, unsure where he stood. Legends called him the Shadow Knight long after he retired. Chapter 141, The River That Spoke. Fishermen swore the river whispered advice during quiet nights. Those who listened claimed it guided them to fish, avoided floods, and even prevented accidents. Whether magic or coincidence, the river earned reverence across villages. Chapter 142, The King Who Walked Barefoot. One monarch refused shoes, claiming humility connected him to his people. His subjects admired his endurance and simplicity. Pilgrims noted that the barefoot king inspired loyalty without decree. Chapter 143, The Library That Moved. A monastery library was built on rolling platforms, allowing it to shift rooms and corridors. Monks joked the books rearranged themselves to teach patience. Scholars marveled at its unusual architecture, though few understood its purpose. Chapter 144, The Knight Who Never Slept. A warrior claimed sleep was unnecessary for the vigilant. He patrolled borders, castles, and towns relentlessly for decades. Enemies avoided him, fearing a tireless opponent who never rested. Chapter 145, The Town That Ate Only Wild Herbs. Villagers relied on herbs, roots, and wild plants instead of grain or livestock. Their diet was strange to outsiders but kept them healthy and resilient. Herbal knowledge became the town's most prized inheritance. Chapter 146, The Monk Who Painted Dreams. Every night, a monk painted visions from his dreams. His artworks captured creatures, landscapes, and events no one else had seen. Over time, his collection became a guide for imagination and philosophy. Chapter 147, The Castle That Stood on Ice. Built on a frozen lake, the fortress survived winters when others would collapse. Engineers used the ice to strengthen foundations rather than fearing it. Visitors called it a marvel of resilience and daring. Chapter 148, The Merchant Who Spoke in Riddles. A trader used cryptic phrases to negotiate deals. His words confused competitors while delighting clever buyers. Those who decoded him often gained the greatest bargains. Chapter 150, The Knight Who Carried Seeds. Before battle, a knight scattered seeds in conquered lands. Fields grew after wars, leaving a legacy of life amid destruction. His unusual approach made him both feared and respected. Chapter 151, The King Who Listened to Trees. A monarch spent hours among forest groves, claiming trees whispered advice. Officials dismissed him until he avoided disasters and improved harvests. His unusual counsel made him both respected and mysterious. Chapter 152, The Blacksmith Who Forged Rain. A smith created intricate metal sculptures that channeled water during storms. Villagers discovered his work could divert floods and water gardens. He became known as the man who shaped both metal and weather. Chapter 153, The Village That Painted Shadows. Residents decorated walls with painted silhouettes of themselves. At sunset, sunlight aligned perfectly with the images, creating living shadows. Travelers marveled at the artistry and precision, calling it a miracle of light. Chapter 154, The Knight Who Spoke to Birds. A warrior trained birds to deliver messages across battlefields. Enemies underestimated him until his flocks guided reinforcements and supplies. His feathered allies turned him into a legend among armies. Chapter 155, The Monastery That Drank the Fog. A monastery collected dense morning fog to water gardens. The practice kept crops alive during dry seasons and inspired future irrigation techniques. Pilgrims called it an ingenious harmony with nature. Chapter 156, The Castle That Floated. Engineers built a fortress on rafts for a river that frequently flooded. It drifted gently but remained defensible, frustrating invaders. The floating castle became a symbol of adaptability and strategy. Chapter 157, The Merchant Who Sold Stars. A traveling trader offered polished crystals that reflected sunlight like tiny stars. Though simple, people believed them to hold magical properties. His wares were treasured for both beauty and superstition. Chapter 158, The Town That Whistled. Villagers communicated entirely through whistling over hills and valleys. Messages traveled farther than words, allowing warning systems and daily coordination. Visitors were amazed at the precision and harmony of their sounds. Chapter 159, The Knight Who Rode Two Horses. A daring warrior mastered riding two horses side by side. His speed and mobility surprised enemies, giving him an advantage in pursuit and retreat. Legend said no other knight could match his skill. Chapter 160, The River That Reversed. One year, a river suddenly flowed upstream. Fishermen adapted, and the unusual change brought new fish species. The anomaly became a story of resilience and curiosity for generations.